House prices in Ireland continue to rise inexorably in all parts of the country, extending further and further out of reach, particularly for many young people who are trying to get on the housing ladder and first-time buyers. Many politicians and commentators have described it as a housing emergency, and then Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, when he was in office, previously said that we need a COVID-style response to address the housing crisis, where the state takes massive dramatic interventions to fix the issue. Now, there are of course many reasons for Ireland's runaway house prices and many complex contributing factors to the problem, but one element which is not very often discussed and which is not widely known is that a not insignificant amount of a new house's cost is simply government taxes and levies which go directly to the state. This is outlined quite starkly in a 2023 report by the Society of Chartered Surveyors Ireland, or SCSI. In that document entitled Real Cost of New Housing Delivery, the SCSI found that on average, if you purchased a new private 3-bed semi-detached home in the Greater Dublin area for 461 grand, over 18,000 of that would go on various levies, while a further 48,000 or so would go on VAT. This means that almost 15% of the house's total cost is going directly to the government. These costs include things like stamp duty on land purchased, planning authority development levies, electricity connection levies, gas connection, and Irish water charges to connect the home to the water mains and things like that. And notably, these kinds of utility levies are charged even if you pay for the physical work to be done yourself, such as the trenching and piping and cabling and all that. Many of these levies apply only to new builds, so this often affects the price gap between new and existing homes. And one also has to wonder how much of the taxation on secondary and tertiary things like building materials and electricity and so on drives up the cost even further at various stages in the process. Now, obviously, even in the unrealistic scenario that all of these costs were eliminated altogether, house prices would still be very high and likely out of reach for many people. Nobody is suggesting that this is the primary culprit or the main source of the broader housing problem. But it does seem noteworthy that despite rhetoric around housing being in a state of emergency, the government has in its power the ability to instantly reduce the cost of new housing construction by as much as 15% or more overnight with the stroke of a pen, and yet they're not doing so. Some will no doubt point out that some of a tax cut would simply be pocketed by developers, and in some instances I'm sure that may be true. But that's what market competition is for, to produce a contest where such companies try to undercut each other and drive the cost down, ultimately benefiting the consumer in the end. The government seems to understand this basic economic principle in areas like hospitality, but not in housing, which is vastly more important. After a decade and a half of state failure in the housing market, only economically illiterate socialists think that more state-led solutions are needed and turn their nose up at anything that involves letting the invisible hand of the market do its thing. The state has tried time and time again to micromanage the housing situation for years, and look where that's gotten us. Yet, some people think that the only solution is more of that same failed strategy, without any consideration for alternatives. At this point, we've reached a broad consensus that housing is clearly one of the biggest issues facing society, and that radical options may be required to solve it. This problem is holding back families, it's holding back the economy and foreign direct investment, it's driving immigration and reducing the birth rate, it's putting massive pressure on so many critical areas of society, and yet, when you try to buy a new house, the government is looking for a 15% cut. It's certainly worth thinking about as part of this broader debate.